Best Pride Month ever? Made all the better, of course, by the coping and seething in the radical left-wing extremist milieu of the 40k community. A tabletop wargame near and dear to my heart, of course, that has been going through some problematic times as of late, as GW desperately tries to wrestle with the current-day political environment. Being a bunch of ancient-ass boomers, they haven't got the faintest clue what's going on in their own setting in the wider world, and certainly not in modern-day politics. But let's have a look at the coping and the seething, shall we? Because it's always funny, isn't it? As the whole Horus Heresy rulebook controversy continues yet further, with here in a Goonhammer editorial trying to explain why this is such a problem. Now there's a bunch of waffle at the beginning, so let's skip down here. It is important when it comes to the rules and the effect it has on the games we all love? Question mark. But recently we've seen an example of where it's even more important. What could this possibly be then? Let me give you a bit of background on the topic at hand before we look at the mistake, because you need to understand the context it lives in to grasp why it's such an error. Okay, let's see here. How many paragraphs? Where do we actually get to the... Ah, there we go. Right, so we've got about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs worth of context to understand why this is a problem. Right. If you need more than 2 or 3 sentences to explain why you're offended, odds are you're not offended, you're indoctrinated, but oh well, details. The experience of trans people are myriad and varied and complex, and I absolutely don't speak for all or even most of them. Okay then, your objections are invalid. Thank you for clearing that up immediately. I don't see why we should even go on with the rest, but fair enough. Perhaps there's a trans person out there who's not experienced any abuse or discrimination, but I'd never heard of them, and it's hard to imagine how it could be possible in a society that is so rampantly transphobic. This, I believe, is a UK website. Rampant transphobia is a real problem in the United Kingdom, you see, to the point that, well, there are special laws on the books to criminalise it specifically. There are harsher punishments for people who do something that might be perceived to be transphobic, that perception being determined by the court and the victim, of course, and you can go to jail for saying mean things about them on the internet. My god, if this is the transphobic society, I would hate to see any other period in human history. Trans people have been used as the butt of jokes for decades. Oh god, no, not the jokes. I get what he's trying to say here, but again, it's like, what do you have to complain about? Well, people have made fun of me in the past. Had their lives interfered with by society for longer and excluded from many of the rights and freedoms that other people take for granted. Like what, specifically? Trans healthcare? Well, that's a right. It's not specifically to that. Uphill battle, blah blah blah. Conform with expectations, blah blah blah. No apparent real example. Often the victims of violence and abuse, as are people in general. In fact, men are often the primary recipients of violence and abuse. Oppressed not by government and authorities, but by communities and individuals. You are oppressed by an individual. Good job, I suppose. That's difficult. In ways that are depressing, dangerous, and sometimes deadly. Most people in the LGBT community know a trans person who has died far too young. Now, there is actually a point, because as many people have mentioned, and which might be a bit of a hate fact on YouTube, the suicide rate of trans people is ridiculously high, which again really should raise some questions about transitioning in and of itself and how we are doing it in the modern day society, but once more, tiny insignificant details, I do suppose. Into this boiling point of stress and fear is poured bile and viciousness by a small percentage of the population. But I thought you just said we had a rampantly transphobic society. How can our society, which is, you know, the majority of the populace, be rampantly transphobic as if this is a small percentage of the population? They are not the majority of people, but they have loud voices and they are relentless. There's a joke in the UK that there's only a few hundred transphobes in the UK, but they all have newspaper columns. Okay, so you seem to be undermining your point here again. We don't live in a transphobic society. In fact, the people who are transphobic are a viciously tiny minority. Okay, let's accept that as gospel. Why is healthcare such a struggle? Why are you being oppressed by the government, by society, by even individuals? Immediately the logic begins to fall apart, but again, that's why I mentioned the previous thing. If you need 6 paragraphs to justify your outrage, you're not actually angry, you're indoctrinated. But let's skip the rest of it here. The language of hate these people use poisons the discussion of trans issues, blah blah blah. So this is where we actually get to it. This is the poison. The process by which space marines are created relies inherently on the hormonal and biological makeup of the human male. Only men can be space marines. This has been canon since the earliest days of proper 40k in the 2nd edition. It has always been this way, it will hopefully always be this way, and it's simply just how it is. Like there are no male sisters of battle, there are no female space marines. But of course, this isn't the problem of representation, as he doesn't even mention that in this entire thing. It is about harm. You see, we are being harmed by your language, and therefore you must conform to our standards. You must bend the knee and abide by our tyranny. Otherwise, we'll claim that you're attacking us. I see. I feel like there's been several movements like this in history. One a few years ago, for example, with the Jews. They were being viciously attacked by the Jews, and fifth columnists, in fact. I believe it was something starting with G, I believe the country was. Oh well, again, minor insignificant details. The hormonal biological makeup of human male sounds innocuous if you're not aware of the process that is going on to alienate people from their trans friends. Oh god, we're not even done with the justifications after 6 paragraphs. Oh Jesus, how much further does it go? If you do not know enough about this miserable debate to know the word used to imply hate rather than state it outright, to imply. You mean as to mention a canonical fact in a fantasy universe, as to imply the literal scientific fact of the difference between males and females in the human species? Let's get the science out of the way. Oh goody, this is where we get interested. There is no specific hormonal or biological makeup of a human male. Incorrect. In fact, I love it. Let's get the science out of the way. There's no difference between humans, males, and females. This is too stupid a point to even take seriously. Now, they do have a point in that both males and females have estrogen and testosterone, the primary ingredients of males and females. And what was last one? Pre-testosterone? You know, I'm not a biologist, it's a wonder I can even tell what a woman is, frankly. So that's not a requirement these days. But the difference in makeup are significant, and even goes to admit that if you have enough of traits of one kind, as in if you have enough of the biological and chemical building blocks of our species, you are indeed called male or female. Enough, and we go female. Not enough either for us. Makes snap judgment little evidence. Well, those people are intersex, and they get fixed. Oh yes, the intersex justification. This is brought up frequently. Oh, you see, there is no such thing as male or female gender because intersex people are born all the time. It's constant. People are born within a gender all the time. There's so many of them. We have to make this clear that gender basically doesn't exist. Well, here's the thing. True intersex is defined as when the individual does not have enough of either phenotype, male or female, to be divided into either or camp. Where this happenstance is unfathomably rare. It is 0.018% of all births. It is... Not only is it not common, we can comfortably classify this as, to use the video game lingo, a bug, not a feature. This is not the intended consequence. Do these traits have significance? Yes, some of them. In fact, the vast majority of them, particularly medically, many of these hunters and traits are very important. In fact, if you're a man and you don't have enough testosterone, you are likely to be depressed, you are likely to be overweight, you are likely to have a wide variety of health issues like heart problems, for example, is one of high estrogen in men. This is why we divide people into different types, because, well, they are broadly speaking correct. In this case, 99.99 something percent correct. We go on to the next usual line, but this is fiction, you might say. It doesn't matter, and that's fine. Yeah, that is fine. Okay, there we go. We'll just skip over the next because there you go. Fine. Science in a fantasy universe is science in a fantasy universe. Your argument is invalid. Let's hone in on the other side. How we express ourselves. The word we choose matter. Yes, for example, when you write a lengthy article like this, outlining your grievance, what you are trying to do is fashion a cudgel, a stick with which to beat someone, to shame them, to force them into accepting your point of view and your perceived reality. It might also be referred to as, well, blackmail, I believe, as it also, I think, links to a petition asking GW to change the law, to censor themselves, and to remove their, well, decades-old law now, because if they don't, well, you know what's gonna happen. You know, it's illegal to commit a hate crime in the United Kingdom. You wouldn't want to be a criminal, would you, GW? Again, cudgel. Using the word print in the Horus Heresy rulebook, even if the online meaning made sense, it does, it wouldn't be appropriate because it mimics the language used by bigots to foster hate and division. Alright, so let's take this as the spoken gospel, shall we? Even if that is true, mimics the language, as in doesn't even parrot or fully represent, it simply, if you looked at it in a skewed enough way, you could kinda see it. Alright. Not good enough. Even if we did in fact assume that this parroted the language of bigotry, which is apparently in this case saying that male and females are different, a literally irrefutable biological fact, it wouldn't matter. It's a fantasy universe, science fiction technically. It's a bad misstep, and if it was single author, I would be displeased, maybe reach out, but ultimately, you know, a person makes a mistake from time to time. But no, this isn't one person, it's a company, and therefore it is inexcusable. Games Workshop has a problem with bigots. And there comes the cudgel again. And I don't mean that in a good way. We all know it, and though many of us do our best to promote communities that are inclusive and diverse, and punch fascists in the face as hard as possible. Cudgel, once more. You see, we return to the idea of extremism, because I keep calling these people extremists, and I mean it because this is the language they choose to use. Alright, let's take their gospel for a second, okay? Words have meanings, words have implicit meanings, words can be harmful, they can stoke hatred and division, outright violence, and in fact, as they mentioned previously, they know lots of trans people that have died far too young because, presumably, implied, due to bigoted language. Okay, punch fascists in the face as hard as possible. There's the problem right there. You are preaching the exact same thing. You are accusing the opposition of. The opposition which is not fascist. It is not fascist to say there appears to be differences between males and females. It is not fascist to say law that has been law for 30 years should remain law. None of this has anything to do with fascism. But as you immediately reach to, we must create our own communities, our own cliques. We must segregate from the wider people, because they are evil, you see. Except they're also a minority. In fact, oh my god, you could expand upon this infinitely. Literally, the cornerstone of fascist ideas is that there must be an external enemy. That external enemy must be at all times threatening. It must be omnipresent and omnipotent, yet it must also be useless, retarded, and worthless. It must be constantly dangerous and constantly idiotic at the same time. The external enemy is everywhere and nowhere at the same exact moment. You should read up on some of the fascist propaganda about its enemies. It is fascinating because it echoes almost to a T modern day progressivism, where on the one hand, the Jew, the capitalist, the banker, the socialist is everywhere, and also completely useless and retarded and can't do a damn thing right. In fact, they're hard, well, that's much harder if Games Workshop put shit like this in their books like a weapon ready for use by the bigots. Here's the thing. I've already seen bigots use this passage as a cudgel. Remarkable, isn't it? Again, word for word. You go through paragraph. Okay, what are they going to do next? Well, they're going to force the words. Then they're going to accuse the opposition of doing the exact same thing. In fact, it's not even the accusation of the opposition doing it. It is, hey, I totally think the bad people will do this, therefore it is fine for us to do it. Like, literally, you are using this like a weapon to be used against GW. This entire thing, I might be able to accept it. A person makes mistakes, but the author of this book isn't a person, it's dozens of people. It should never have been printed. I believe they go on to mention we need them to employ sensitive and English. We need them to employ sensitive readers. Censors is the term for that, my friend. And check their language. I need not expand any further. For issues, we need them to make exclusive and diversity a core part of their identity. 14 words burgeoning on the horizon, and creativity not just a statement they put on a website every year or two. It's Pride Month, and I, for one, feel very proud of Games Workshop. And hey, you know what? This doesn't need to be a problem, you know, Goonhammer, you and I can get along perfectly well, right? Because, well, here's the thing. GW has already put out a statement in this regard that I suppose fits perfectly. It's not quite the word as written, but I believe what they said was that, you agree with Games Workshop or, you will not be missed. So, you won't be missed, I guess. Until next time, I've been Arch, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.